In real estate in particular, there's almost a longer history of voluntary disclosure and voluntary participation. So we have GRESB, PRI, and other schemes out there. So from the panel, where do you see, and whoever wants to go first is great, where do you see voluntary reporting and disclosure? Is it important? Will regulation replace it? Does it need to continue? And how, as real estate organisations, do you work your way through the myriad of different reporting schemes? How do you pick what's important? There's lots of questions there.
Emily's waving.
Emily, hi, thank you.
I'd be happy to take a first pass and then hand it over to my colleagues on the panel. So we think they're important, and I'll sort of chin hat a little bit and talk about how, as a corporation, we engage with those. And we do think it's important to be a leader and actually a role model in ESG and climate risk disclosures. So Moody's Corporation provides disclosures under all of the frameworks all mapped together, but TCFD, GRI, PRI, CDP, you name it, right? Around, what's our net zero commitment, how we're dealing with risk in our real estate portfolio, our offices, in terms of transition risk, detailed physical risk assessments. You would think that would be the least we could do. We're a founding member of the Net Zero Financial Service Provider Alliance as part of the Glasgow Financial Alliance on Net Zero. So that means we're committed to integrating net zero considerations in all our products where relevant and material. And so I think the consolidation that we're seeing, I'm sure you've heard the recent announcement that CDP, CDSB, SASB, and IR, sorry for the letter soup, you don't need to know those acronyms because they're going away, merging into one board that will be under the umbrella of the IFRS, so accounting standards. That's a game changer. You're not going to have to deal with 25 standards going forward. You're going to have to report in a way that's really aligned. And then just a little curveball into this positive landscape evolution, and also tying to the SFDR conversation earlier, we need to be ready for the US to continue to blaze its own path and so not necessarily follow those recommendations. We know that the regulatory requirements from the SEC that are coming forth in early 22, they may or may not be aligned to TCFD recommendations. They're certainly not going to be aligned to SFDR. And so for global investors, for those of us who navigate in between those different markets, there's going to be some challenges in dealing with the difference in expectations. How quickly the markets are moving and how far the regulators go. The EU obviously has gone a lot further in its specification. I wouldn't expect US institutions to be quite as prescriptive. We know that other countries like Japan, for example, tends to have yet a different approach and maybe a little more hands-off, but working on expectation a little more. So we're not yet at a fully standardization globally, but it's certainly starting to look better.
Thank you, Emily. So, from a voluntary reporting, I want to let's drill it down to GRESB. So, in real estate, we have to do, and I know a lot of the panel members have to participate in GRESB, or all of you do. Has it been a force for good? It's a challenging question.
I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to answer the previous question
Thank
with
you.
it as well.
Yeah.
So. On reporting, I think it's interesting to observe the trends that we're seeing, which will actually also come on to this GRESB point. So I guess the trends that we've been seeing in terms of investor expectation around reporting, we for many, many years published a M&G RE sustainability report. I think increasingly we're kind of not publishing that anymore in favour of publishing fund by fund, full sustainability reports for the fund. And that is a trend now, that the level of information that our investors expect about what we're doing on a fund-specific basis has just completely transformed over the past couple of years. But the other interesting trend that we've started to see is the investors not just wanting that report, the summary, but increasingly asking us for the underlying data so they can run their own modelling of transition risk and their own modelling of physical risk initially, and asking for energy data, carbon data. And so actually I think that, you know, the data transparency trend is only going to get more accelerated, that actually investors don't just want the summary piece, they want to, particularly the larger investors, want to do their own analysis. So I think that is the trend that we're definitely seeing and is set to stay and only get more sophisticated. Particularly, you know, we're going to see that on taxonomy alignment, we'll see it on any number of indicators that they start to ask for. So going back to the GRESB question, has GRESB been a force for good? Yes. And if you think about why GRESB was sort of started in the first place, it was to stop the duplication of effort that we were all facing, kind of one investor asking their survey on one thing, another investor asking their survey. The idea was that you could use GRESB as a single conduit. So I think it's been an amazing force around transparency, data collection. When you compare real estate to other private asset classes, you've probably got more knowledge, but I would say real estate has really upped its game, probably GRESB being a massive driver behind that. Has GRESB moved with what the investor expectation is, net zero carbon, actually looking at the performance of assets? I think it probably the 18-month consultation that it's now in at the moment reflects that GRESB recognises that it needs to go through quite a radical transformation, as we're kind of all doing, to really stay fit for purpose. So I think it has been good, but we need to see a massive transition in what it's doing. Otherwise, because what we're seeing again is a proliferation from our investors of different questions at the moment, asking for data. They're not using GRESB as the source of that because it's not doing as much as they need.
And Bill, that goes back to your point as well, about change and about the industry as a whole needs to change, and we need to reflect this. And there are going to be painful points along the way.
Yeah, and there's a, you know, you mentioned the word transition again on GRESB. You know, Nina and I have talked about proliferation of aspects of this over more than a decade. One of the aspects I think is probably worth pointing out, for government-imposed regulation, everyone has to do it. It's there. You might not like it, and it may be clumsy, but it's there.
Yeah.
One of the issues about voluntary is you can end up with lots of nearly similar competing regimes, and the amount of people that are nearly duplicating things but not quite, and time wasted does detract from doing the purposeful things that really make a difference. And we all want to get to ultimately global, to Emily's point, ultimately global comparisons, where an investor relatively simply can see the difference between all the things that we're doing and can make judgments about that. So you want to get to global standardization that is relevant and purposeful, and that's the goal.
Yeah.
I'm afraid it's going to be quite painful to get there.
Yes.